Live on WFLA now. Feel good and live your best life with Bloom Health Club. Here's Gail Guayardo.
Today we're talking about missions of faith. You know, we are a health and wellness show. We talk a lot about exercising our body. Maybe you do crossword puzzles or any other activity to exercise your brain. But do you ever think about exercising your soul? You know, for a lot of people listening or watching right now, this might sound ambiguous. You might not even believe in a higher power. But our guest today believes the best way to get on a spiritual path is simply by having everyday conversations. Joining me now is Carmen LaBerge, a hugely popular host of the Daily Christian Talk radio show. And she asks people to consider their typical day. And Carmen, first of all, it's such a pleasure to have you on the Bloom Health Club.
It's so much fun. Thanks, Gail.
And I wanted you to meet our producer, Sarah Smith. She helps to put the 1 hour special together every day that airs on WFLA News Channel 8. And she's going to be kind of co-hosting with me today. And we're excited to deep dive into this conversation with you.
It's really fun. Thanks, Sarah.
Nice to see you, Carmen.
You too.
So, Carmen, I've known you since we were children. I mean, for many, many, many years.
Your mom taught me to walk with a book on my head. So we've known
way
each
back.
other. We go way back.
Yeah, just to clear, my mom was a protocol teacher, a manners teacher, and Carmen can tell you I was definitely her number one student. She had the most work to do on me. But I was talking to Sarah about this as we were just so excited to book you to become not just part of Bloom, our globally syndicated talk show, but also to come on the Bloom Health Club. I said, you know, the one thing when you think about how you remember people in their childhood is I just remembered you and still hold on deep to this. You illuminate light. You were always so kind. You know, you were always so gracious. Just being around your energy back in the day made me feel like, okay, this woman's got a calming influence. Did you feel that as a child? Is this what directed you to where you are today?
That's a good question.
It's a great question.
It's such an honor, first of all, for you to make that kind of observation. I tend to, there's a couple of people in my life who I refer to as like they are shiny. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to receive that as like, you're making an observation that you experienced me as shiny. Well, that's a huge compliment to a person who wants to be reflecting the light of God into other people's lives. I think that I would make the observation that everyone has like a social contagion. Like you are infecting the environment that you're in all the time, either positively or negatively. You are bringing your energy into something and it is changing. It is either positively or negatively affecting what is happening in that space. Just think about being in the car. If you're in a really wretchedly bad mood, the car is not a fun place to be, right? And so you can literally change the atmosphere of a given space by choosing to either sort of emanate light or darkness, I guess, would be my way of reflecting that.
Now, you know, before we dive deep into the conversation, I want to just be super transparent with everyone again listening or watching this show today. When I came up with the idea to do a 1 hour special on missions of faith, it definitely raised an eyebrow because I work in traditional media. You know, we're not a faith-based show. We're not on a specific channel. You know, we are a broad appeal. And so, you know, when I broached this, I'm like, you know, this is not about getting in religious debates. This is not about one person's opinion versus the next. This is about how we can live our lives at a higher level. Mm-hmm. And I think when you start to approach it that way, and when you say religion, people get nervous. But when you start to approach, like, how can I live my life just emanating that glow that, I described about you. And you say it starts through conversations, whether it's with, your children, your spouse, your friends, maybe someone you're just cross paths with at the grocery store. It all starts with the words that come out of your mouth.
So there's a different approach to conversations with people who we are in intimate relationships with, because there's obviously a different level of trust there than like the person I'm standing in front of or behind in a long line. But if I'm standing with people in a long line, I'm going to be there a while. So I can choose what the conversation is going to be about. I mean, I can either isolate and, just get on my phone and and act like there's nobody else in the world that I should pay attention to, or I can stand up, I can look around, and I can embrace an opportunity that presents itself. And I just try to start with really open-ended, honest conversations or questions that are maybe unusual. I mean, what's the hardest thing you're dealing with today?
Right.
Well, what's the hardest thing you're dealing with today? I'm a perfect stranger in a random line. You can tell me, right? And you'll just be surprised. People will share, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that. Well, how are you dealing with that? How are you coping with that? I know as a person of faith how I would answer that question, but I'm not there for me. Right? I'm there as an ambassador. I mean, for me as a Christian, I'm there as an ambassador of a king and a kingdom. I'm there as a conduit of grace. I'm there as a person of peace. So giving another person the opportunity and the space to say something out loud, like what's the hardest thing you're dealing with right now, is incredibly liberating. And so, I mean, that's just one example. Obviously, if you're in relationship with people, you're having different kinds of conversations with them.
But you believe, and Sarah, you can weigh in on this too, but Carmen and I were talking on a show that's actually going to air Wednesday of this week on WFLA News Channel 8, and then all the different places around the globe that Bloom is broadcast. But over the last 2,000 years, Jesus has gotten a bad rap. A lot of people have tried to represent him or say they know what he was trying to say, but it's like playing that game of telephone. The message gets watered down, the message gets misconstrued along the way. And really, he was, in my humble opinion, this revolutionary guy that was trying to do the right thing. And if you can learn to live your life a little bit closer to how he lived his, you'd be in a much better place.
Sure. I like that you use some of those words that start with MIS. So I make a little play on that in Speak the Truth. And I want you to think of literally like a pageant. And I want you to think about, people up there with those pageant banners, and so it's misrepresentation and misinformation and misnomer, all of the names that people might call God that really aren't God's name, or all of the ways in which they might represent God that really aren't God's character or his ways. And there's a whole thing going on where people are misrepresenting and miscommunicating, and therefore people are misled. And so we want to be people who speak the truth. First of all, you have to know the truth. So that's a challenge, right? So know the truth and then speak the truth, but do so in ways that actually reflect positively and represent Jesus in a way that he would recognize as himself.
And remembering too that your faith has to be your own,
Absolutely.
Your own lived experience. If you base it on the other people, you're going to get hurt because we're all human. We all fall. The church, it's run by humans, and we're never going to be perfect. Jesus was the only perfect person. So having your own faith and it being your own experience is also crucial.
Yeah, and your own relationship, I think, with your religion or your belief system. And I am going to repeat over and over again because I don't want to offend people that are listening.
Right.
Yes, I am a Christian, and I do go to church most every Sunday, and I do, read verses before I start my day, and I pray before I start my day, and I try to keep this relationship going. But that's what it is. It is your relationship, and you have to approach it how you want to approach it. But how do you use your radio show to help people find that connectivity? Because I think most people that find their way into faith have gotten there many times, and I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me, because they have been so broken.
People operate really with some very basic and primary challenges. One would be like a question or questions about their identity. Another one would be about like a purpose, like what in the world am I here for? And the other would be about belonging. And all of those are critical questions that folks are dealing with. And so you may be that may be what you're challenged with, is like I don't know who I am. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know if life has a point or a purpose. Or I don't feel like I fit anywhere. I don't have a sense of community or belonging. And I think that it doesn't, again, to your point, Gail, whatever expression of faith you embrace, or if right now you don't embrace one and you're wondering maybe if there's an option out there where you could be connected, where you could discover who you are and a purpose for your life. I just think that one of the things that we're trying to express is a faith community might be something worth checking out.
Yeah.
Because it's a point of connection.
It is a point of connection.
Just go and ask them, like, what are you guys doing in here inside this building? Like, I hear some freaky things. What is happening?
And
like, there's, you know,
and it might
Freaky
take walking
things.
into several buildings.
I mean, no, totally,
You know,
absolutely.
a
Or
lot of
going to the park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there were Hare Krishnas at the University of Florida when I was there. And now that everybody has like big headphones on and their phones, I like wonder, like, how are those guys getting to connect with people walking across campus? Like, right? Like,
Yeah,
you got
it's
to talk
true.
to people.
You do. You have to like explore. I mean, I've gone to so many different churches before I found a home. And then, you know, you can read, you can listen to podcasts, you can listen to books. There's so many ways to explore. And, you know, I talked just a little bit about this with Carmen on Bloom. Again, the show that will air on Wednesday, that, you know, for me, I was always raised in a very devout Catholic family. And we went to church all the time. I went to Catholic school. And then fast forward, I landed in Auburn, Alabama. And at the time, there weren't any Catholic churches. So I was walking into new churches and learning new things. And then, you know, as I grew up and started raising my family, I realized that, you know, while I appreciated the foundation of the Catholic Church, there were other, you know, things that I wanted to learn and expand upon my faith. And I finally landed, and just coincidentally, Sarah happens to be a phenomenal director at
Oh, you're
Radiant,
sweet, Gail.
Radiant Church in Tampa. But I think once you find a place that you can plug in and learn and soak it in, that's when the transformation really starts to happen. And it's not about church politics, and it's not just about what this person believes or what that person believes. It's truly about learning every day how to change your life for the better and live it for the better.
Yeah. So I encourage people to get into the Word of God. So, I mean, again, I'm coming at this from a Christian perspective. And so I'm going to encourage my listeners. You asked, how do I use the radio platform to do that? I ask one question at the beginning of every show, every single day. Where in the Word are you? Mm-hmm. Now, it's a play on the fact that, you know, my name is Carmen, and I used to get asked, like, with the singing, you know, like, where in the Word is Carmen Sandiego? So for me, asking where in the Word is a redemption of a terrible song, but that's okay. So to ask people, just to plant that question, because everybody is full of something. I don't know, Gail, if you've experienced this, or Sarah, but people are full of it. Like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so people are full of something, and I'm going to be full of something. And so when the world squeezes me, and it's going to, what's going to come out? Well, I want it to be the grace and truth of who God is. I don't need me coming out. People don't need another piece of my mind. They need the peace, you know, of the mind of Christ. And so I want to have people fill up every day on what God has to say and his character and his ways, so that when we are squeezed out there in the world, what comes out is the best possible answer to every question.
I love that. I love that. So let's talk about you on a personal level and how you've actually built your show around your life. I mean, your studio is on your farm, and it's an actual like radio
shack.
It's a radio shack.
It is.
It's right out of 1980s. No, it's a really great studio.
Yeah, people have probably like seen these. You like drive down any rural road and you'll see that like the Amish have like a sales yard, right, where they're selling those little buildings. Mm-hmm. That is what my radio shack is. It is one of those hauled onto our property and set up. And so, you know, on other people's properties, it would be a she shed, right?
Right.
But I work for the University of Northwestern St. Paul in Minnesota.
Okay.
But my studio is in, you know, on our property in Middle Tennessee. So this is the extraordinary truth of technology today. I can be at home doing what I do, broadcasting to the world, which is just an extraordinary reality. So I don't have in-studio guests because I'm still in my pajamas at 6 a.m.
I love that.
So every day, you know, I'm up at 4. I get up before the rooster does, and he crows my day. Once he's crowing, I know it's time to head out there from the house to the shed, and yeah, I'm live on air for 2 hours each morning, bringing the headline news to people in a way that hopefully honors God. So people are kind of exhausted. I mean, it's kind of hard to say in a news environment, right?
Right.
But people are kind of exhausted by the news.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah. And so how can I prepare and equip listeners to be ready for the conversations of the day? Because people are going to be talking about the Pope's funeral. People are going to be talking about the war in, well, pick one. I mean, right. So how do we have that conversation in a way that takes God's perspective into things? Like, how do I really get myself prepared and others prepared to enter into the very real conversations that are going to happen today in ways that honor God?
How do you honor God when people are having political discussions? Because that gets...
God cares about that.
Yeah.
He does. So first of all, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So part of it's just perspective. Like, right, this is a point in time reality. And we don't live at the most complicated point in time in human history. We don't. We don't live in the good old days. And nobody has ever lived in the good old days, because the good old days ended in the Garden of Eden. Like, right? That's it. We're not going back there. So since then, we've had to figure it out amongst ourselves. So when we're having political conversations or conversations where people are deeply divided politically, it's important to find the most common of ground. So what can we agree on? I guarantee every hand would go up if I said, raise your hand if the answer to this question is yes, or if you agree with this observation. Something is wrong.
Yeah. Everyone was going to raise their hand.
Everybody raises their hand.
Right.
So I have a worldview that says I actually know what that wrong is. And it's so old and it's so historic, nobody's escaping from it. And it's sin. Like, it doesn't really matter what we point to. The problem is a brokenness. We are separated from each other and even divided in our own minds because we're at odds with God. We're at enmity with him. It's not working like it was designed to. And it's not going to work perfectly like it was designed to until he gets to have his way. Like, right? So we are always living in the meantime, like the in-between time. And sometimes the meantime is genuinely mean. But I don't have to be mean in the meantime. I get to choose whether or not to be a person of joy or a person, of just grievous conflict. Part of this, Gail, for me, is also how you see people. So I see every other person as a prayer prompt.
Really?
I like that.
That person is a prayer prompt.
I like
They're
that.
not in my way, in line. They're not cutting me off in traffic. They're not like whatever, right? All of the things that I could get really easily spun up about. That person is a prayer prompt. Something's going on in their life that is causing them to behave in a way that's not only potentially destructive to themselves, but to everybody else. Something's going on. Let me pray for them.
There is a major mental health crisis going on in this country as well. And, I think obviously throughout history, people have struggled with mental health issues, but it seems to be touching so many lives because, to your point, something's off, something's wrong, and people feel lost. And so where do you think faith plays into all of that?
Mm-hmm. So mental health is a extraordinarily complex and challenging issue because there are people who have like a genuine chemical, right? There's something chemically going on in their body,
yes,
right? And that is different than someone who has a diagnosable personality disorder or has such a trauma or a history of trauma that it produces in them a mind that does not operate the same as a person who is free of all of that. So I see churches engaging in like freedom prayer as something that has been tremendously helpful for the trauma-affected mental health issues that people face, but that does not so much hasn't been found to be as effective in some other cases. There are some folks who approach it not only through medication that treats the chemical component, but also, prayer that says there's something spiritual going on here. I think that when we look at the way Jesus encountered people who we would have called crazy, like we would have said, that is a mentally ill person that Jesus is dealing with right there. I mean, the way that the person is described in their behavior and their interactions with others. That language of scripture is that person is a demoniac, that there's a demon issue going on there. Well, that is hard to say in our culture today. But if it's a spiritual reality in the days of Jesus, why would I think it's not a spiritual reality in our day today?
Right, right. Carmen, I want to also ask you, like a lot of people, you touched on trauma a little bit. A lot of people that dealt with trauma and their childhood is why they live their lives the way they live it. And it's really not their fault. I mean, they're just trying to find their way out of it. And I hate to say like living a life of sin, we all do. As hard as we try, we're going to stumble, we're going to make mistakes. We are human. But there are a lot of people that I think make bad decisions, and I can look back on my own life and say, why was I becoming so self-destructive? Why was I in my own way, not hurting others, just hurting Gail? And I think that, for me, the way out of that was a true connectivity, not just being dragged to church by my parents on Sunday, not just being told what to do, but truly finding that connection, because that's kind of a roadmap of life. And it really helps you step away from hurting yourself. And that's the only other way I can describe it. I think a lot of people are masking pain or making decisions based on pain from their life and from their childhood.
And they're trying to do it in their own strength too, which, I mean, you got to rely on someone else. I mean, that's the only way to get through it. At least that's how I felt in my own life. I was trying to put all my pieces back together myself in my own strength. And it wasn't until I relied on the Lord that it really was able to piece all back together.
Well, and he has the picture of the whole puzzle.
Exactly.
We're just operating with one piece, and we're like, I don't even know where the piece goes. I don't know what the big picture is. And so, Sarah, I think you're making this incredible observation that God's able to do that because he sees it all, the end from the beginning. He knows us all. He knows more about us than we know about ourselves.
Right.
And so that's a beautiful, beautiful observation.
He has all the details figured out.
He does.
He does.
And he loves you
Right.
more than anyone else ever will.
Right.
I think that, Gail, to answer your question, we have to be willing to be vulnerable. And if you've been hurt, being vulnerable is really scary. And so folks who have had a trauma experience, that first step of faith is a little bit scary, but you can trust that God is good and that God loves you. And that would be my invitation. Like people are able to describe their come to Jesus experience, right? But it's an invitation from him when he says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, come to me. And I will give you rest, even rest for your soul. And so if your soul needs rest, there is a guy who's inviting you to come.
And I think, the disconnect though for a lot of people is they think, oh, it's going to happen right away. I said this prayer and why isn't he answering me? It's a journey.
It is a journey.
And it's a lot of work and
Mm-hmm.
it's a process and things don't happen overnight.
So the work part is, there's a big theological word for that, sanctification. But you got to get to that first step of justification first. You have to get into the relationship. And if anybody's ever been in a relationship, they're work and they're messy. And so your relationship with God is going to be work and it's going to be messy, but it's incredibly fruitful and wonderfully joyful.
Well, Carmen, I am so incredibly proud of your life, the way you're living it, the message that you're getting out. And how do folks get in touch with you and watch you and listen?
One stop, CarmenLaBerge.com. There you can find the show and the book and all the things.
All right. Thank you so much, Carmen. Sarah, as always, thank you. And I'll see you in the Bloom office.
Yes. Thank you, Carmen.
Thanks so much.